Sometimes in life you feel like a ping pong ball. You're going back and forth. You're uncertain about things. You think you have all the questions answered, and then someone comes along and changes the questions. Shout out to Roddy Piper for that. But with the Nintendo Switch situation right now, we've obviously been chronicalizing this, not just for the past few days, but really for the past few months and the past few years. All we know is that a Nintendo Switch OLED model is indeed launching on October 8th. Lots of my friends got one early from sketchy sellers, and I guess that's kind of cool. But the fact of the matter is, one of the things that a lot of us were anticipating was a 4K Nintendo Switch. Now, whether that's a Nintendo Switch revision, a Nintendo Switch Pro, a Nintendo Switch successor, we didn't really know. We just heard over and over again from sources like Bloomberg that this was indeed happening. Of course, we've gotten a lot of new interesting stuff coming out of Bloomberg over the past few days, stuff that we've chronicalized on the channel before. I'll catch you guys up to speed if you missed those videos, but you shouldn't, because you should be subscribed to the channel. But now there's a whole monkey wrench thrown into this situation, because now we have definitive proof that Nintendo is indeed working on technology that would supplement a 4K Nintendo Switch, and it's like, what the going on here? So in today's video, I kind of want to talk about what this information is, how it sort of correlates into what we've been hearing lately, and try to solve some of these mysteries with this system, because it seems like it's real. It seems like it's very real, and it sounds very, very exciting. So in case you missed the other videos, like I said, I will briefly catch you up to speed. Essentially what happened was Bloomberg came along and did yet another report talking about a Nintendo Switch 4K model. Now supposedly this 4K development kit was sent out to 11 different developers, one of them being a company called Zynga. Now Zynga is the only company that was named in all of this, and Zynga is a company that's actually working on a Nintendo Switch game right now with Star Wars Hunters. That is a free-to-play game that should be coming to the Nintendo Switch sometime in 2021, taking place within the Star Wars universe. But beyond that, Zynga is a company that's only really done mobile games up until this point. This is actually their first console game, so it seemed kind of weird that of the 11 companies that allegedly got a 4K development kit, Zynga would be one of them. Now, what their partnership is with Nintendo, we don't really know, but all we know is that Bloomberg said 11 companies had this Nintendo Switch development kit that was capable of making 4K games, and now since there is no 4K on the Nintendo Switch OLED model, they were just essentially making games for a system that doesn't exist. Right after that, Nintendo of Japan's business account actually tweeted out that this was all false information once again, which is actually something that they have done with Bloomberg before in the past, talking about that Bloomberg was just talking out their ass essentially. If you're an investor in the company, don't worry, there is no other Nintendo Switch coming out. They are only releasing the Nintendo Switch OLED model. Then we got an update on this whole thing with Zynga, as they were the only company that was named in this situation. And Zynga actually put out a statement saying that they did not have a 4K development kit for the Nintendo Switch, so they were unsure of where this story was sort of coming from with it. So really it seemed like Bloomberg was sort of in the hot seat with this, but in all my coverage of this situation, I did say to somewhat keep an open mind. Of course, Nintendo's going to deny that they are working on another console. Of course, Zynga is going to deny that they have a 4K development kit because, well, I'm pretty sure that would break NDA agreements that you have to sign when you get a development kit. That's a reason why you don't hear much about development kits, except for sometimes pictures that leak and whatnot. These development kits are under scrutiny. These developments are under non-disclosure agreements that companies have to sign. And if they break these assigned documents, basically they're putting themselves up to litigation, all sorts of legal recourse and whatnot. So it's not a smart thing to do it. Plus, essentially, you're pissing off someone who is a video game company that you probably want to work with down the line. So after all this, I was very confused. You know, I want to believe that there is a revised Nintendo Switch coming. I want to believe that Nintendo is smart enough to know something, that they need to do something like this, but something like the Switch OLED coming along, that's essentially the same sort of Switch system, just has a different screen on it, and of course the mysterious dock that I still don't understand why it's going to get updates for. Beyond that, if you're not a handheld player, the Nintendo Switch OLED is a pointless system. So then we got to thinking, well, you know, was it a chip shortage thing? Maybe this 4K Nintendo Switch is what Nintendo intended the OLED model to be, but because of the semiconductor shortage that's going on right now with developing new hardware and new technology, they decided to just release an OLED model in the meantime. But there was one thing that I found very fascinating with this whole situation. We didn't have any concrete proof. We had no concrete proof that Nintendo was working on a system that was capable of 4K because of the fact that, well, Nintendo never revealed it themselves. It was all circumstance. It was all just happenstance as we were talking about this stuff based on reports from other people. But now I don't know what to think. Because now there's proof. There's proof of a 4K Nintendo Switch in development. There's proof of Nintendo working with 4K technology. And the way they're going about it is exactly what we said Nintendo was probably going to handle this situation when it came down to it. So this new information is actually coming to us from a brand new patent that has just been put online. Now, this patent was actually applied for back in March of 2020. It was just made public yesterday. So it's kind of interesting when you consider all the things happening right now with the talk of the 4K Nintendo Switch. But like I said, this is actually proof because this showcases what Nintendo is actually doing, at least as of last March of 2020. So essentially what this patent is, it's for artificial upscaling of games, which is something that we have said this entire time that that's probably the route Nintendo would go. I honestly feel like the artificial upscaling of games is going to be the future of video games because it allows for less powerful hardware to do things that you would think would need very powerful hardware in order to do them. And of course, the main thing that we've seen right now is the NVIDIA DLSS technology, which allows for this upscaling to happen. Well, in this patent, it says the following: image up conversion is a technique that allows for conversions of images produced in a first resolution, example, 540p resolution or 960 by 540p with 0.5 megapixels to a higher resolution, 1080p resolution, 1920 by 1080 with 2.1 megapixels. This process can be used to show images of the first resolution on a higher resolution display. Thus, for example, a 540p image can be displayed on a 1080p television and, depending on the nature of the up conversion process, may be shown with increased graphical fidelity as compared if the 540p image were displayed directly with a traditional upscaling on a 540 television. Different techniques for image up conversion can present a trade-off between speed, how long the process takes for converting a given image, and the quality of the up converted image. For example, if a process for up converting is performed in real time, such as during a video game, then the image quality of the resulting up converted image may suffer. And they even go on to say that one given example for the way it'll process it is pretty much how a Nintendo Switch works, where a game can process at one resolution while the device is being powered by a battery, aka handheld mode, but when plugged into a power socket or connected to the TV, then can output an upscaled image. And that's something that, like I said, that's pretty much what we thought this new Nintendo Switch was going to do in order to achieve 4K. It probably wasn't going to be native 4K because that requires a lot of power, and that's just what Nintendo isn't interested in right now. They haven't really been interested in the power wars since what, the GameCube era, and I think it's time to realize that. But the things you can do with actual technology make it a lot more interesting. There's another example in this patent that discusses the potential use of it in things like cloud gaming, which when you're playing for a cloud-based game, it'll send a compressed low-res image to the Nintendo Switch, and then the AI will use to upscale it up to 1080p to reduce things like latency. And of course, cloud-based games are something we're starting to see a lot more of on the Nintendo Switch. Recently, we've gotten Hitman 3, we've gotten Control. Of course, the upcoming game that's going to be a cloud game for the Nintendo Switch is Marvel's Avengers game, or whatever the hell it's called, and Dying Light 2. So it seems like more and more companies are wanting to do cloud-based games on there. And if you're able to do cloud-based games with lower latency, that would be a big win for these games, and they might end up being more attractive to people because of the fact that, hey, now you can play these games, and this artificial intelligence that Nintendo is using, whatever it's going to be called, they should call it blast processing or something like that. That would be pretty funny. But whatever this technology is going to be called will be fully utilized. So it's weird. You know, it's very weird to me, the timing of this patent becoming available for anyone to read. Like I said, I'll have it in the description box down below, but now I'm not sure what to think. Like, obviously this is going to be utilized in a future system, and I still do believe that we're getting to a point where Nintendo has to decide what the next Nintendo Switch is going to be. Is it going to be a PlayStation 4 to a PlayStation 4 Pro situation, or is it going to be a proper successor? Because the more time goes on, the more it makes sense for it to be a successor. But I guess as long as the successor itself still plays the baseline Nintendo Switch games, do we really have anything to worry about? Do we really have to worry about it being a Pro or being a full-on successor? It seems like the diminishing returns of these next generation consoles as far as the quality of games and the power gap is concerned seems to be getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And considering that Nintendo is not interested in that power gap, and they've done things like this before with systems like the Game Boy Color, which I believe was a successor, but there's lots of people who don't, and of course the new Nintendo 3DS, which wasn't really a successor, but I feel like if it was actually successful in terms of the games that were designed only with that system in mind, then it would have been, you know, classified as a successor. It's going to be very interesting. It's going to be a very interesting future for Nintendo. Do you make a system that only plays Nintendo Switch games as a sort of Nintendo Switch Pro with this 4K technology, or do you make an updated system that has its own library of games that fully utilizes additional power, and then of course have the Nintendo Switch backwards compatibility? It's exciting though. You know, it's very interesting to see actual proof that Nintendo is doing something with 4K stuff. So let me know what you think of all of this in the comments section down below. Is this going to kind of sway you to maybe wait on the Nintendo Switch OLED to see what Nintendo does in the first half of 2022? Because I mean, technically they could come along with an announcement about a new Switch that has this 4K capability, and I think the fallout from that would be very interesting. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Be sure to like and share this video, as well as this is obviously a very hot topic, and I try to break it down as much into simple terms for you guys because, well, I'm a simple kind of man. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.